Good day, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe because we've got new content coming at you every Sunday. And of course, this Sunday is our next episode of 1,000 Words or Less. I'm very excited to have our guest on this month, Katherine Forrister, who is a novelist right here from the great state of Georgia, who's just released her new novel, Lodestone, from GenZ Publishing. Katherine, how you doing today?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Doing fantastic, and other than the fact that you're my fifth guest on the show, so of the first four, three have been Georgia writers. So other than that particular fact, what can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, like as you said, I was born and raised in Georgia. A couple years ago, I actually moved out to Kansas City, so I'm living here now. And haven't really had as much of a chance as I'd like to explore the city because of COVID. but you know, looking forward to getting out there more. But I have, other than writing, I like baking and video games and board games and all sorts of nerdy stuff. So.
And, a well-rounded existence in my book. So
yeah.
Well, I understand you were sharing an excerpt from your novel with us today. So before we get to you reading the excerpt, is there anything you want to tell the audience about it? What do they need to know before they hear from you?
All right. Well, I'm going to be reading just from the first few pages this time, which I haven't done on any shows yet, so yay. But it's a dark fantasy novel, and it's about a lodestone peddler, which her name is Melaine, and that means that she takes her raw biological magic and channels it into crystallized form. And they're called lodestones. But she sells them to other people, and she weakens herself in the process so other people can use her magic to make themselves stronger. And it's viewed as a very degrading job, and she wants a better life for herself. So that's what starts the whole story off. And it's just a book about haunted castles and dark magic and sort of almost Beauty and the Beast style romance with this powerful sorcerer and her, and so it's fun. Yeah, I enjoy it.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful mix of images to encounter. So if you're ready, though, I'll go ahead and let you get started on reading the excerpt.
All right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Katherine Forrister from her new novel, Lodestone.
It was late in the day, and there wasn't much magic left. Melaine struggled to guide the pure magic that originated in the marrow of her bones into her clenched fist. The deep power that nestled in every infinitesimal pocket of her body pulsed with a vibrancy not unlike a beating heart, ready to break through her skin and forge the physical with the metaphysical. She opened her fist and revealed a dark purple gem that flashed under the sun's glaring light. "That's good, love," said the rough-hewn voice of Melaine's current customer, a stranger. "Better be a good one. I got a job to do, a big one." She avoided looking at the man's pockmarked face and squinty eyes and stared at the stone in her palm, diamond in shape and purple-black like a bruise. Every bird bone of her wiry body felt petrified. The stone scorched her palm from the dense magic she had poured into its confines, but frost crystallized her veins. She waited to thaw and for her lungs to regain the ability to push outward. She begged her muscles to overcome the inertia it would take to become a living being again instead of a vulnerable statue in the streets of Stateside. Finally, her lips drew a breath. Her exhale was icy fog, though it was a fine autumn day. The fresh lodestone in her hand grew cold. She fell back against a grimy brick wall that formed a seam between two ramshackle tenant buildings, her senses reeling from exhaustion. The early autumn sun, drumming the last beats of summer's heart on the land below, warmed her veins, but the damp chill of the wall pressed through her brown threadbare dress. Her customer, who stank of rotting teeth, leaned into her. His hot, grubby hand peeled the fresh lodestone from her fingers. He tossed it in the air and caught it with a heavy thump before wrapping his greedy paw around it, hiding his prize from view. He grunted with satisfaction as he felt the magic she had infused inside. "It'll do the job, won't it, love?" he asked, his squinting eyes meeting hers as he gave her a yellowed smile. You're the best, they say. You charge enough for it, don't you? He grasped a fistful of her lank black hair. Melaine hissed as the back of her head knocked against the bricks, but she didn't yet have the strength to speak. You know what I think? I think you charge too much, no matter how bounced your stones are. Melaine parted her chapped lips, drawing air from her tired lungs. A tuppence, her voice was hoarse, like we agreed. The man laughed, showering her with fetid spittle. A stamp of boots on wet cobblestones rushed toward them from down the street. The customer loosened his hold on her hair and sauntered back, though his eyes were alert as he shifted them around the huddled passersby. Melaine kept her eyes on him. She recognized the cadence of the approaching footfalls. A young boy who roamed the streets, called Jim, had once lifted shoes from the corpse of a man who had a peg leg. One of the boot's soles had a hole in the center from the wooden peg, causing every other of Jim's steps to sound hollow. That, combined with the flapping sound of shoes that were too big for the wearer, made his run unmistakable. "Marm!" Jim's little voice called from down the street. Melaine gathered her strength and pushed herself off the wall, though she swayed on her feet. Her customer bounced on his heels as he eyed the boy who was darting through people and past an empty cart, which no one had bothered moving from the middle of the road. Melaine knew Jim was harmless enough, but her current buyer didn't. Even children in Stakeside could be dangerous, either by their own gumption or under someone else's tutelage. The customer grunted in annoyance and flicked a coin at Melaine. It landed on the cobblestones. He gave her a last leering expression before he shifted away down the street. Melaine braced her hand against the wall and prepared for a bout of dizziness as she stooped over to scrape the coin off the street. Jim puffed to a halt, his damp, wind-swept hair falling into his eyes. He wiped a hand across his pink cheek, leaving a smear of mud in the light sheen of sweat. "Vinter wants to see you, marm," he said, "in his shop." Jim's voice was a little hoarse, and his frame was as skinny as anyone's in Stakeside, but he hadn't yet outgrown the brightness of youth in his eyes. Melaine wondered how long it would take. "He's paid you?" Melaine asked. The boy hesitated. Melaine's mouth slipped a wry curve, knowing she had caught on to his trick. "Aye, he's paid you. Go on." She nodded down the street, though she didn't really care which way he decided to go. Jim averted his eyes. A flicker of disappointment tinged their hopeful light as he lost the opportunity to trick her into paying him twice over for his delivery. Melaine had no doubts he'd learn his trade in time. He took off down the street at a more relaxed jog than before. Melaine was probably his last message recipient for the day. He would find some hole to crawl into for the night, most likely one of the little dens that children tended to make for themselves in the tight crawl spaces and sewer entrances where adults couldn't fit. Melaine's one-time haunt had been a half-buried supply crate at the base of the Stakeside wall, right behind the butcher's yard. She'd stayed there till she was 6, and then moved in with a group of 15 or so orphaned waifs who lived together in a cistern. That was before she'd started peddling lodestones, of course. All right, so that's the excerpt.
That is a great introduction to the book.
Thank you.
Both the opening paragraph is fantastic. I also really loved the detail about Jim's shoes, kind of like a peg leg man. That was particularly clever.
Thank you.
Now, this, as you said, this is a dark fantasy novel, and so it means a lot of this world literally has to be built up out of your imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done it on a small scale in some of my stories before, but then of course I'm also a fan of J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Charles Williams and George Lucas and Star Wars. You know, so there's so many different rules you have to set out for yourself, so many different decisions you have to make for yourself when you do this kind of world building. What are some of the what was the process that went into the kind of decisions to create this worldview?
For this world in particular, it was kind of an interesting way to go about it, that since Melaine sells lodestones and she sells her magic, so magic is a currency in this world, that it really, the world building started by building the economy, which sounds kind of dry. Like that's not really it's not the fantastical, beautiful maps and all the stuff people think of with world building. but it was so crucial to her story and who she is as a character that I had to build that first. And there are also magic can be stored, like certain spells can be stored in objects called insights, which can be anything that used to be an alive biological creature, or like bones and teeth and, you know, old roots and things like that, but they can be turned into insights. But rich people like to hoard those insights and keep those spells and that knowledge from the poorer classes. So there's just a lot of stuff that goes into the world from there. And then I expanded it just to have everything else in there, all the cultural stuff. And there's a religion that becomes central to the focus that also gets ensnared in the politics, and just lots of stuff. So it all started with the magic system originally and moved outward. And
then rich people started to hoard resources, and politics and religion got mixed.
Yes. So yeah. All the beautiful, like the maps of how many trees there are and what kind of creatures they are, I do that, but it all came second. You know, it was like all the fluff and fun stuff came after the more, I guess, grounded aspects of the world.
You created the shape and then you colored it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and particularly with the magic, because one of the things that I've noticed just from different other authors who have dealt with magic is they all seem to have their own different rules to play by, and that's what they have to establish. Was there how obviously this is your own creation, but was there any particular fictional work that helped you to kind of figure out what the rules of magic were, or because you were starting off thinking of this as a magic as a commodity, did that really drive the rule decisions, or were there some outside other influences from authors or TV shows or whatever?
Yeah, so a lot of it, like I said, did stem from the character and the story itself, took me in the direction I went. But I really admire Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series, and he has a very grounded magic system that's very detailed, and so I loved his world building and his magic system. And so mine is very different, but I did take some lessons that he helped teach me just by reading his books about how a magic system should have rules and should be grounded, but still can still be whimsical and fun and very magical.
I mean, you know, the way we use the adjective of magic, if it can't be whimsical, you know, where's the fun? So
right, exactly.
As a writer, where's the fun? Obviously for the reader it's gonna be fun, but for the writer, if it can't be fun, then it's just work.
Right, exactly. Like, no, there are a lot of very fun spells and fun moments in Lodestone. Very cool magic. I think it's cool magic.
Yeah, and Maurice, I'm just getting started my viewers. I'm just getting started in the book myself, and it is already fantastic. So everyone needs a summer reading book. So please, you need to make sure you go out and get this. But something else that Katherine and I had decided we wanted to discuss about is, of my early guests, you are the first person who is not a self-published writer, but actually has gone through the publishing process. So how is that? What is that experience like in terms of what you expected it to be like and what it ended up being like? And then also any advice you might be able to throw out to folks who don't even know where to begin.
Okay. Well, it starts, of course, with after you've gotten your draft, and I advise write and rewrite and edit and self-edit as much as you can first. Don't think the first draft is perfect, and don't beat yourself up about it if it's not perfect, because it's not going to be perfect. But it's a good starting place, you know. So once it's ready to be sent to agents or editors to query, that's where I was nervous, and I had to prepare myself for rejection, because pretty much every author gets rejected by somebody at some point in time. It's going to happen. I got very fortunate with Lodestone that I only submitted to 7 people, and I got 6 I got 5 full just rejections first, and then a complete manuscript request that ultimately got rejected. It's like, which honestly hurt a little more. It's like, you read the whole thing and you still didn't like it. So you're gonna have moments like that. And then it was my 7th submission that got chosen. GenZ picked it up and I got publishing deal. But there are a lot of people, sorry. There are a lot of people though who submit to hundreds of agents, and then they get a huge publishing deal eventually, and it's awesome. So it doesn't matter how many you submit to, just keep at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I got the deal, one thing that pleasantly surprised me is the collaborative aspect of working with a publisher, that it's not all on me. And I think a lot of authors are worried about losing creative control over their work if they choose to go with a traditional publisher versus self-publishing or a small publisher. And it was very rewarding working with GenZ Publishing. And the editors were fantastic, and any feedback that they gave me usually was amazing, and I agreed with it. The few times that I didn't, they were very receptive to my feedback about it, and we worked together to come up with a solution that we both ended up being thrilled with. So there's a lot that goes into it that I didn't fully expect or I was nervous about, that ended up being amazing.
As someone who has mostly had short stories rejected by plenty of people, you're absolutely right. But if you're going to write, it's like I imagine like being a musician, you need to be prepared for way more rejections than successes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's interesting, because I definitely have my own preconceived notions about what will happen if I take a longer work to someone. So the collaborative nature is very interesting to hear about. But I'm also really glad to hear that you still feel like it's your own work.
Yes.
It's not like they're rewriting your novel.
Right. I did not have that experience at all. It was definitely a collaborative effort to both be happy with the manuscript, and I think it's a lot stronger for it. It's very like kind of a lonely, isolated, but in full control to sit there and write the book. But then you have to be ready to open yourself up to other people's opinions once you get to the publishing phase. And even, and self-published authors often hire editors, and so they go through that same process. But I loved it. It was great working with a publisher.
Just out of curiosity, when you first started that process, how hard was it to let go, kind of the sacred cows and the, famous, there's one guy's famous advice was when you start editing, take your favorite paragraph and cut it out. So how hard was it to kind of open yourself up to, or was it at least the people you were working with, did they make it pretty easy to open up to that, to make you comfortable with making changes?
They were great with, they made me feel important and that my work had value, which of course, since they took it on, then they saw great potential in it. And they were just very receptive, like I said, to my feedback, and I was receptive to theirs, which I think is very important. At first is that first developmental letter, developmental edit letter, where I sit there and I just cringe, and I'm like, okay, it's time to open up this attachment, this email attachment, and see just how they're just gonna tear it apart, and and so it takes a moment of preparation and breathing to accept and get in the mindset of, they have the best interests at heart, and so do I, and we're working together. And then I jump into it, and it's never as bad as I think, because I have that right mindset with it. And it gets easier as I go along throughout the numerous edits that go through during the process.
Then just to give our viewers an idea, but how many, rough ballpark estimate, how many different edits, or however you want to I guess how many class, I'm sure it kind of was kind of split up into bits and pieces as you went. But overall, you know, how many kind of versions of the book ended up occurring before you got to that final product?
This one, I think maybe about 5, I think, but it wasn't ever full rewrites. The first 2 couple times were developmental, and so it was really just making sure the story arc was strong, that the character development was solid, and all of that stuff. So we took care of that in about 2 rounds of edits. And then it was copy edit, which is making sure that paragraphs flow together and that there's no major mistakes. That's where you would check research and facts and things like that. And then there were a couple of rounds of proofreading edits, which is just for grammar and typos and things like that. But they sought my approval every single round of edits, which was great because I did feel like I still had creative control, in addition to their input and their amazing work. And
because, you know, I'm sure at some point in your reading career, you have run across a book where they missed a typo. And yes. it's jarring when you, there's one of my favorite novelists is Michael Shara, and which is I think a weird person to have as a favorite novelist, but they found a novel of his. He died back in the early 90s, but they found a novel of his just in a shoebox and went through the editing process, but they literally from one paragraph to the next switched the spellings of the main character's name.
Oh,
and
no.
went back and went, how did no one catch this?
Well, and it goes through, like, that's why there were like either 2 or 3 rounds of proofing edits, and they would go over it, and then I would go over it, and they would go over it. I would, you know, back and forth, because every time there were just like the tiniest little typos that one person would miss, then one person would, and it's human to, our eyes automatically fill in a word usually, you know, like our brains see it and they just flip the letters to be what we think it should be, and so we don't notice, like, oh, those words, yeah, it's a typo.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that is why I am such a terrible editor. My students in my classroom remark about how horrible my tests are edited.
Oh no.
Because I'm like, yeah, guys, I'm actually a really good writer. I'm a terrible editor because I know what I wrote.
Right.
So, you know, I never catch any of the mistakes. So it's always good to have multiple eyes in addition to your own on the text.
Absolutely.
Now, we are kind of coming to the end of what we plotted out for our conversation. But where can, obviously this is being published through, you know, formal publishing channels. So where can we find the book? Can we find it in any bookstore, or where else can we find it?
It's available at for requests at any bookstore. If you can't find it there, then any bookstore can order a copy for you. It's on Amazon. It's on bookshop.org, which if you want to support indie bookstores online, then that's the place to go. Okay. And it's on Barnes & Noble, and you can request it at your local library. So any store can carry it. I'm not sure how many do, but any store can, and it can be ordered for you if you don't see it at your local store.
All right, fantastic. Well, as I already said earlier in the episode, everybody, you need a good summer read. This is as you've already heard from the excerpt at the beginning, it's already hooked you in there. So go out and get the book so you can read the rest of it. Katherine, thank you so much for coming on and joining us today. And I wish you all the best success with this book. And do you have any future projects in the work you want us to know about to look out for?
I do. With GenZ Publishing, again, I have a book coming out next year called The Hand-Me-Down Maiden. And it's not dark fantasy. It's kind of the opposite, where it's a 1920s fairy tale romance, sort of historical fantasy kind of book. So that'll be something fun to look forward to.
Well, that's fantastic. And when it comes out next year, hopefully you can come back and join us on the show again for that book.
I would love to. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you and hearing all about the book. So everybody, again, go out and buy your book because it's fantastic. We can already see that from just the first few pages. So everyone, hope you've enjoyed having Katherine on the show as much as I have. Don't forget to like and subscribe. and then make sure you come back and join us every Sunday because we got new content every week. Y'all take care and have a wonderful day.